Helping Seniors Television, all about improving quality of life for seniors. If you're a senior, know a senior, or plan to be a senior, then this show is for you. It's all about helping you develop your own aging plan so you can age actively and with dignity. Helping Seniors Television from the Helping Seniors Network of information, education, and resources.
I'm Kerry, Fink. Welcome, guys, to here we are again. It's our monthly meeting at the Senior Resource Center of Brevard. It's our community information event that we have the opportunity and the privilege of being here at Zon Beachside in their lovely Nautilus Ballroom. And as you know, if you guys have been here throughout the year, that our theme for the year has echoed what Joe Steckler, our president and founder, has always talked about, which is putting together an aging plan. And what he means by that, and we are all kind of familiar with this because we just went through the hurricane drill once again, is that, you know, if you have a hurricane plan, it doesn't mean you want a hurricane. It actually means the opposite. You don't want the hurricane. You just want to be prepared for whatever might come your way and not just have to react. And so that's Joe's point about an aging plan. So at the start of this year, Nancy Deerdorf, who's waving over there, she's our operations director, 33 years registered nurse experience, and has been a board member with the Helping Seniors going back to the days before there was Helping Seniors. In fact, goes back to the days when Joe was building Joe's clubs with Brevard Alzheimer's. But we, at the beginning of the year, were talking about how do we get people to plan ahead? And we came up with the euphemism, getting your ducks in a row. So everybody says, oh, I'm going to get my ducks in a row, because we always put off all these things. So this whole year, we focused on topics that we believe are kind of like the core elements of an aging plan. So the first thing, if you remember at the very beginning of the year, we started talking about legal. What are legal documents that you probably want to have in place so that there's no confusion? It's like, I love the term I've heard, the government has a plan for you if you don't have one. The problem is it may not be the plan that you have in mind, which Amy could probably talk for days. Yeah. And the second month, we talked about financial. And you remember we had Beth Courtney come in from Cornerstone Financial Group, and she talked to us a little bit about things that you want to think about, like how to get to zero tax income, zero taxable income in your retirement years. She talked about timing of when you take Social Security payments, all those kind of things. The next month, if you remember, we moved on to living at home safely. Like most people say, I like where I live. I want to make it safe in my elder years. What are the things I need to take into account? The month after that, we talked about, well, what if you're ready to make a change? You say, I might downsize. I'll look at assisted living. I might, need more help as I go along. So I want to look at what my options are and what I might be able to do. So we covered that. If you remember, then we followed up with medical, and in particular, Tracy Graff, who's a registered nurse, has her own company, Avid Home Healthcare. She spent a lot of time talking about the 5 reasons that seniors wind up in hospitals. And so we talked a little bit about that. And then most recently, we were talking a little bit about Medicare and making the right choice when it comes to, because here we are, we're in the middle of annual enrollment period and those things. So what we're going to try to do today, last month with Rachel McLean's help from Amy's office, we talked about transportation. So it was big fun because we got to talk about our car raffle. The winner, by the way, was local from West Melbourne, and she was there that night when we drew the winning ticket. And so Mark Pylock, the owner of the American Muscle Car Museum, stood up there on stage and said, which car do you want to take? And she goes, Camaro. So that's what our winner did. And Mark, by the way, kindly, graciously said, you guys are invited back next year. We never take it for granted. So there will be a 7th annual Helping Seniors car raffle coming up in 2023. So, but we talked about transportation. We talked about the car raffle, but we really wanted to talk about, well, how can you get to medical appointments? How can you get around the county? If the situation is that you shouldn't be driving yourself, what are the options? And so Rachel brought us a lot of things that were helpful for that. So this month, what we're going to do is try to tie it all together. And we're going to do this a little bit conversationally because Amy, I love a thing that I heard Amy say. She said, most of us deal with the things that happen to us as seniors or with the people we love as seniors, maybe a few times in our life. Think about it. It's your mom, it's your father, it's maybe your spouse at a certain time, all these different things, but they're dealing with this. We're dealing with this in onesies and twosies. They're dealing with this like 20, 30, 40 times a week. So I always think if you're going to get wisdom, get it from somebody who's in the thick of it. They know what's going on. And one of the things that I have heard over and over, Tyler has said this, Katie has said this, you have said this, everybody says, you know, don't try this on your own. In fact, we think that's going to be our theme for next year. Like, you know, some of the biggest messes that you help people sort out is when they did try this on their own. They walk in the door, there's an emergency, but the problem is with the emergency, you can't do these paperworks over. Maybe just start with like an overview of why this is so important to get this aging plan in order.
Well, if you start with the legal documents, there's just a basic 5 documents we do for just about everyone that we can convince to do them. But the most important as Florida residents are durable powers of attorney and healthcare surrogates. So if you can no longer make medical decisions or legal decisions for yourself, who do you want that to be? And is it a spouse? Is it a child? Is it a neighbor? Is it a company? I feel a lot of corporations will step up to the plate. If you do not have those 2 basic documents in place, you are looking at potential guardianship. And guardianships start at about $10,000 in Brevard County, just to let you know. So having 2 really basic documents in place can avoid thousands and thousands of dollars of legal fees later on. So a lot of the documents that we do, we're either trying to avoid probate, which we do lots of revocable trusts for that purpose, or the power of attorney healthcare surrogate, which avoids the guardianship, So just having those documents in place, but it also allows you to think, who do you really want to make medical decisions for you? You know, if your spouse has maybe early dementia, maybe they should not be on some of these legal documents. Or maybe we can write them in a way where we're not being offensive to that, you know, the spouse with dementia or Alzheimer's, but still having one of the kids maybe on the documents as well. So just sort of talking that out, who is the best person in that place. I use my kids as an example. I have 2 daughters. One's an attorney, one's a nurse. So my attorney is here. My nurse is in Oregon. I just got back a couple of days ago from seeing a new grandson. It was fun with the hurricane, trying to get back into Melbourne, by the way. It was a bumpy ride. But because I have a nurse and an attorney as daughters, on my healthcare surrogate, I have either daughter A or daughter B can make medical decisions for me. The nurse is the furthest one away, but my daughter, who's an attorney, is, 10 feet from me most days at the office. So just kind of talking that out, what makes sense for you. I just got back from a very good friend passed away over the weekend, or last weekend, excuse me. And the documents I had written for the wife we need to tweak it. They don't really fit what she wants now, where it was a stepson being appointed as her backup power of attorney and her backup healthcare surrogate. And now that her husband has passed, she's not really sure that's the perfect person. So just having that conversation, and I always tell everybody, my younger attorneys say, how do you meet brand new clients? And I say, for the first 45 minutes, we don't talk about law stuff. We talk about family. We talk about what's important, where you live, where are you from, where did you retire from, and those sort of things. So just talking it out. I mean, anyone can spit out a form. It's making sure that the people that we're appointing make sense.
You know, as I get the privilege of talking with people who really know their stuff like this, one of the things is, there's that old saying, it's on the internet, so it must be true. So a lot of us, we think we're pretty clever, and we'll go out and when a topic comes up, we'll Google something and think like we found an answer. But what I've increasingly learned is that can be, a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing in these cases, because then we get overconfident, we write something. And the problem with a lot of the paperwork is you don't really get a chance to do over, because these paper have to work right in that time of crisis, right?
Exactly. We see people pull off the internet or from Patrick Air Force Base, a durable power of attorney. And when I get hired to do Medicaid or VA planning, all of the bells and whistles are not in those documents, and they don't allow us to do some of those really complicated techniques in order to qualify someone for Medicaid or VA. And we've had a situation where a client went to another attorney. They were a really good estate planning attorney, did not also practice elder law like I do, got a full estate package. It looked really good. But when we had to send off the power of attorney to, I think, Fidelity, they wouldn't accept the document because it was missing one sentence. That one sentence cost them a $10,000 guardianship, and it cost them about $12,000 for 1 month of skilled nursing care. So again, even though they've got the power of attorney, it looked really good. They did go to an attorney, but because they didn't practice elder law, they didn't know to put all the bells and whistles in it.
And that's another thing that I've heard you guys describe cases where somebody went to somebody Oh, this is the person who's done my real estate closings for years. It's a friend of mine. He's an attorney, so he wrote all this stuff. But what I gather is there's so many nuances, like you've explained. Here in Florida, we have so many people who are moving into Florida for the first time. So maybe they had stuff done, they thought properly, up in the Northeast or in the Midwest, and they come to Florida and they feel like this is jam up and jelly tight because they've got this paperwork, right? And then they get down here, and you've explained particularly that the power of attorney is a whole different animal in Florida, because if you don't give somebody like explicit permission to do this, then they don't have that permission.
Well, that's exactly what happened with my client that ended up in guardianship. Is the power of attorney didn't allow for the agent to liquidate a mutual fund, and that's all it revolved around, a $45,000 mutual fund that we couldn't liquidate in order to qualify this person for Medicaid. Cost the family $22,000.
Well, and that's another dimension. Do we even if we think, well, like, okay, we need a will or we need a power of attorney or something like that, we don't have that holistic approach or that viewpoint that you do, because what I hear you also telling us about again this morning is that you have these documents, but you also want to be thinking in the dimensions of Medicaid planning or VA planning. And we've also talked along the way that there's a lot of pitfalls. Oh, my house is going to go to my kids, so I'm just going to put their name on the title. And you could create all these unintended problems for yourself at the time you really need the help.
Exactly. I mean, I had a lady come to me. She had put her oldest son's name on her deed after her husband of many, many years passed away. And she got mad at him and she came to me to take him off the deed. Well, that's a one-way street. You have to have the son remove his name from the deed. And he refused. He had 2 or 3 siblings. He was like, no, I want the house. And so we couldn't really force him to sign the deed to get his name off of the house. It also could lose your homestead status. So if your child is not a Florida resident and you add them to your Florida home, you could lose your homestead, which is a protected asset in Florida for Medicaid and VA benefits. So you can have a home in Florida and still qualify for Medicaid and not lose your home. I'm from Ohio. My grandmother lost her home because she had to go into a facility for many years, and they pretty much just deeded the house to the state of Ohio. So again, watch out with the deeding. We, as our company policy, we will not add a child to a deed in our office, period. Just won't do it. There's other ways around it. If you want your kid to inherit your house, they can inherit it after you pass away. They also get all the tax benefits of it. So if you bought your house in Palm Bay for 50 grand and you die and it's worth 400 grand, the kids get it at 400 and not pay capital gains tax. If you'd added your kid's name to the deed at any time during that period of time, they'd have to pay capital gains tax potentially. So there's a lot easier ways, cleaner ways to leave your house to whoever you want to get the house without going through the probate process. But you maintain the homestead, you maintain the tax basis and all of those things.
As you talk through those things, I keep thinking about, they talk about how chess is a game of strategy, right? It's not just your next move. You're trying to think 3 or 4 moves down the chessboard. And to me, that's really what you're talking about. Feels like to me is like, this is why the experience is so important, because you've run so many chess games that you've sort of figured out how the best way to approach all these questions are.
Well, it is a chess game. And I always say because I'm VA accredited, 3 of the 4 attorneys right now are VA accredited in my office. And I'm qualifying for VA benefits. I'm playing chess with my left hand and I'm doing Florida Medicaid with my right hand. And because we practice both, we're overlaying 2 chess games.
Right.
And so I've got to make sure at the estate planning level, which is the foundation. So getting your will, getting your trust, getting your powers of attorney, et cetera, that's the foundation. If those are rock solid, then I can play chess with my left and my right hand on the VA, the Medicaid.
Right. And most people, I guess we don't, it was something I was talking with Rachel McLean, who is Amy's director of case management. And she was talking about the fact that while it's not the preferred route, they do get involved in crisis cases. Somebody, now mom's in the hospital, not going to be safe for mom to go home. And so they're all of a sudden trying to figure out all these huge, difficult, think about it. When we get a home, we take a lot of time. We figure out, well, this is the kind of house we want. We want our yard like this. We have all these things in our head about choosing a home. Now mom's in the hospital. She can't go home. And we've got to figure something out like lickety split. And she says, that's something you guys do as well.
We do it all day long. Some attorneys only do proactive Medicaid, which means we've got lots of time to prepare for the Medicaid process. And then we also do crisis Medicaid. And I have 2 full-time employees doing nothing but Medicaid crisis. I mean, it's exploding. So mom or dad are already in a skilled nursing and they're running out of Medicare days. Everyone who thinks they have TRICARE for life, it'll cover everything. It does not. It covers up to 100 days in skilled nursing, usually. So yes, we do lots of Medicaid planning, and I can't remember the rest of the question.
There was basically that was it. Is like you guys are equipped to deal with the crisis situations, but it always ends up seeming like your options are limited and the costs are going to be much greater than if you just got ahead of the curve or got your ducks in a row. And so let's come back to what we wanted to kind of cover a little bit on this today. So we've already talked about that there was like the big 5 documents that you want to be sure. So on the legal side, and the amount that it costs for somebody to put together those kind of documents is minuscule compared to what they might have to get into if they fail to get those documents and then find out they need them.
Exactly. I mean, avoiding guardianship is, $10,000 ish. Probate can start at $5,000 up. So with a really good estate plan in place, you can avoid both of those expenses.
And then the things that I've understood, as we move through those topics we opened up with, we said the legal, then we talked about the financial. I've also understood that, the timing of things that you do, like when Beth was here, she talked a lot. She spent a lot of time talking about your objective, whether you can get there or not, is to try to be at 0 tax level when you are retired. So her whole thing is to help you structure, like when you would take, for example, when you would choose to start your Social Security, how you would structure your other money so that you don't get into a tax bill inadvertently because you took your Social Security and things like that. When you start to pull all these things together, how do you help a family when they come in the first time and say, okay, I surrender. I want to get this right. I want to get this whole thing done. I've had the privilege of talking to a number of your clients, and they all say the same thing. They say that you made it easy for them because when you start talking about all this stuff, I don't know about you, but it ends up swirling in your head like, oh, how many dimensions do I have to think in? How do you break it down and help somebody through the process of getting that plan together?
Well, a lot of times when I meet clients that are in their 60s and above, and they may come in just for an estate plan, that I will slip in 10 or 15 minutes of Medicaid planning in that conversation because I need them to understand why these documents are so incredibly important. So that's usually the starting point. When we do an estate plan, if the client wants to, they can bring back some other documents. If they're a veteran, we have them bring back their DD-214, marriage certificates, birth certificates, things like that. We scan them and hand them right back. So if there is a crisis, we've already got a bank of stuff. Everything in our office is stored in the cloud. So, and even if you move out of town and the kids say, hey, I can't find dad's DD-214, we've hired a different attorney, it's okay. We'll just email it to whoever needs it. But that's the starting point. And a lot of times people in the older generations have so many bank accounts all over the place. They still have their 3 bank accounts back in New York and they were stationed in California for a while. So there's a bank account there. And I'm always telling them, please start consolidating because once, if you lose capacity, and we've got to use the power of attorney to start accessing some of this money, to go through 15 different banks is a lot of work versus 1 or 2 banks, Brevard County has lots of wonderful banks, so that you can walk into and get service. So that's a good starting point too. I was a Series 7 stockbroker before I was an attorney, so I always look at the financial stuff. I no longer invest money for folks, but I certainly understand the statements, and that's a good starting point. And so a lot of times the kids will come back and say, "Oh, thank you. I sat down with my mom and we found all of these bank accounts and we've decided to consolidate to just 1 or 2 or 3." It makes her happy. And going from 10 to 3 is a lot more manageable when we're in a crisis. Or if we're in a Medicaid crisis, Medicare will cover up to 100 days of skilled nursing. And after that, you're self-paying. And it's 10 to 12 grand a month-ish, I think, in Brevard County now. So if we've got a 100-day window to do all of this moving of money around and getting documents in place, sometimes we can't get it all done in that period of time.
That also tags onto the question, like when you think about, it's funny. We all know the expression penny wise and pound foolish. And, so I'm going to save money because I'm going to go to some online space and try to do my paperwork. And it's going to be this much money. But what we're talking about, when you get some of these calculations wrong, we're not talking about swings of hundreds of dollars. We're talking about swings of tens of thousands of dollars. Like if you need Medicaid and you didn't set this up right, and they're going to say, well, you gifted this to your children, so now we're going to count 10 months against your Medicaid benefits. So the first 10 months are on you. I mean, those seem like impossible situations that you could have, you potentially could have totally avoided if you just sat down and done the correct plan.
Well, absolutely. And probably 30% of the time when we get hired to do Medicaid, there has been gifting that we have to fix. If there's a durable power of attorney in place that allows us to do some of these techniques in order to get around that, a lot of times we can fix it. Not everything is fixable, but there's for about every, I don't have the exact number, but for about every $9,000 you have gifted, you lose 1 month of eligibility for Medicaid. So I had a grandma paying tuition for 3 or 4 different grandkids, and that was about 10 grand a semester or something. She lost a lot of eligibility. But there are ways, there are techniques around it. Florida has the most generous Medicaid rules, I think, in the country. And I can access all of these crazy techniques if we've got a good durable power of attorney in place. It all boils down to that one document, really, on the Medicaid side.
You know, this again is why when we talk about putting your ducks in a row, just a little bit of proactiveness is the way to go. And having talked with some of the folks that Amy has written plans for, they say they're really comfortable because at first it was intimidating, but then they go home with a great sense of kind of like comfort, knowing that they have gotten their ducks in a row. But I wanted to, again, kind of come back and maybe revisit that question. Like when somebody comes in the first time, I assume they're probably a bit frightened, maybe a bit embarrassed because they don't have all the right answers, but maybe even a bit intimidated because we don't even know the right questions to ask when we come in. How do you help us get through all that?
Well, we're a pretty low stress office, as you know. So, and I've told you before, I hire the first category or the first characteristic for me to hire anybody is they have to be nice and kind. So if you're nice and kind, I can teach you to do just about anything, but I can't teach you to be nice and kind. So hopefully when you walk in the door, we're pretty nice. We offer seminars. That's a great icebreaker. You know, we do seminars on estate planning, Medicaid, VA, and trust funding as a, you know, if you've already established a trust somewhere. So that's a great starting point, is to come to a seminar, get comfortable with our office, our staff, get you some good ideas in place, and then come in and have a conversation. Not everyone goes to a seminar, but it's certainly available and they're free at our office.
You know, that's a thing I was going to say is over the years, there are a number of the help, because everything we do on helping seniors, our mission, we operate the county's senior information helpline, and we're now well into our 12th year of service with that. The other thing that when Joe put the organization together in 2011, he felt like there was a great need to educate seniors and their families on the things that they might run into, in hopes that by being ahead of it, like he said, he called it an aging plan. We kind of have morphed that into getting your ducks in a row, but it's the same idea. Let's get in front of the problem and try to think how we would handle a situation before we get there. So we've done a tremendous body of TV and radio, and we print, as you know, every month in the center section of Senior Scene magazine. It's called the Helping Seniors News. We call it the Yellow Pages because we put a border around it. So it's like a magazine within a magazine. And our effort, when we get it right, is to put information in there that's of value to you and those that you care about so that you can navigate these senior things correctly. But I was going to say, there's so many TV programs that we've done along the way that are also good resources. Like I mentioned it. We had done a TV program on why not to put your kids on a bank account. There's better ways to accomplish and a lot less riskier. And that doesn't even that's just practical. That doesn't even get into the issues of gifting and things like that. It's just like, I guess there's so many variations. Like you have people moving to Florida like crazy. You have the concept of blended families that, you know, everything may have been set up correctly, but does it operate the way that the folks want it to now that there's a blended family? These are all the kind of questions that you walk people through. So is that part of, like, when they come in the office and they say, okay, I'm ready to move forward, you sit down and you work through all those details?
Oh, absolutely. I get in your business. You know, where are you from? how old are you? How many kids do you have? Is it first marriage, second or third marriage? I tell everybody we're not the judgment zone. I've seen everything, I think, at this point in my career. But we need to know that. I mean, are there children with drug addictions or alcohol addictions, or is there a daughter-in-law you don't like or don't trust with your money? I mean, and one of our questionnaires that we have that we like people to bring beforehand is, all your kids' legal names and are they married? Because daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws sometimes want to get in your business and it's not your place. So talking about all of those things and it's really difficult for a senior to say, yes, my son is 60 years old and he's an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And I've been supporting him his entire life. And those are the kinds of things that we have to know. I mean, we don't want that particular person probably managing your finances if they're not financially responsible. So it can be kind of intimidating, I think, but hopefully we ask it in kind and polite ways so it's not too overwhelming. But I do have to know that, I have to know these things.
I remember talking with one gentleman in particular that your law firm had put together his planning, and he said what he really appreciated was that there was no pressure. You guys gave him like a big list of things, but it was not like you need to have this back by 2:00 Tuesday. It was like he had plenty of time to take it, work with it, come back and ask questions like, I'm not sure what you mean about this. But that experience of kind of being guided through that information gathering process meant a lot to him.
Yeah, well, we've got, our staff can help you walk through it as well. Rachel in our case management department, she's helped lots of clients sort of figure out where their finances are. Sometimes when you get up into your 90s and beyond, you don't remember you've got 10 grand back in New York, so just trying to walk you through that process.
Yeah, I think this may have been a comment from Rachel. She goes, oftentimes people come into the office to think there's just a button that you can push and, oh, here's everybody's bank accounts. Right. And she said, it's not the case, right?
No, there is no button. And I've even tried with my own stuff, trying to make lists for my kids. In our estate planning notebook, or when we do an estate plan, you get a notebook with different dividers in it. And one of the dividers is assets. And I'm always saying, just put old bank statements in there or something so the kids are not on a wild goose chase looking for your money. So whether it's just a copy of, how are things titled and where the bank is and the account number, at least they've got something. And the thing that kind of falls through often are life insurance policies. So a lot of our folks that maybe had retired from a union, like, I don't know, the carpenter union back north somewhere, they sometimes have life insurance attached to them. And if you don't write that down, those are really difficult to find, as well as back in the 50s and 60s when the insurance guy would knock on your door every Friday for the $2 and you get the little stamp thingy. We've seen those policies as well, and the kids didn't know they existed. And it looked like a bank book. It's an interesting, it's interesting that those policies still are in effect, but they are. There's quite a few of them. For Medicaid purposes, if you have whole life, that will count against you in a Medicaid application. So we need to know where those life insurance policies are. A term life policy doesn't count against you, but the whole life will. So if your kids don't even know you've got a whole life policy, you can be disqualified for Medicaid, which is again about 10 to 12 grand a month worth of benefit because you forgot you had a whole life policy split out there somewhere.
That's kind of the resounding theme, right? What even because you've been doing the VA planning for a number of years and helping people who've served our country organize for a benefit that I am surprised how few vets and their families actually know about, and that's that aid in the tennis program. But then I also remember you coming in and saying at a certain point in time, they've now changed some of the rules here because now there's a look back period here as well. So you still have to think in those dimensions, even about applying for a VA benefit too.
Well, absolutely. And I tell my clients all the time, your children can have all of your money after you pass away. If you're giving away your money now, you're going to be penalized for Medicaid and VA loan.
Yeah, and a lot of different. And then there's another thing that I think you might correct me and say it's not that important, but I think a lot of people who move in from out of state, maybe they own property up north or out in the Midwest or something like that, they come here to Florida, and we have some really good, at least I think, protections under that homestead property side of things. And so do you sit with families like they said, well, I've got a home up in, let's just say, New York, and I've got a home here in Florida. And do you get into the conversation on the planning about like which is the primary home and things like that? Is that an important thing that people should think about?
Well, it's really important. And number one is because I'm only licensed in Florida. So if they're not Florida residents, I really am not supposed to be talking to them anyway. But I have had a lot of conversation with snowbirds saying, would it be better financially to be a Florida resident versus a New York resident, let's say, because we don't have state income tax and we have homestead here. And our homestead rules are probably the best in the country. The house is homesteaded. Really, a creditor can't take it except for a mortgage company or the county. So homestead is very important. And again, if you add a kid's name on this deed and you lose your homestead, then your house is up for grabs for Medicaid. You could lose all the Medicaid protection on it. So again, there's better ways to do it. But I've had a lot of conversations, and a New Yorker never wants to become a Florida resident, just to let you know. Right? I was born and raised in New York. I'm going to die a New York resident. I'm like, okay, but let's talk about how much financially that's going to cost you.
Wow.
So, and not all states, have the state income tax, but that is a conversation we have quite often.
So again, a couple of topics that we covered along the way this year as we were talking about going through steps that you want to think about or broad categories. There's this whole question about whether your plan is to age in place. And I like my home. I want to make it safe. I want to do the things so I can just make it work there. And then there's a large number of people who said, look, the kids are out of the house, so it's just us and we could really deal with a smaller place. Maybe we don't want to mow grass anymore. Maybe we'll look at, independent living or assisted living. Do you find that's important in the concept of the overall, I guess, we'll call it aging plan, estate plan? Because again, when you have certain protection with homestead, how is that a factor in some of those thinkings?
Well, I think that number one question is, are you safe at home? If you're safe at home, then by all means, let's stay home. But if you are no longer safe and you have to either hire people to come in, which can be very expensive, I think that's the big question. So my mantra with all of my clients is, as long as you're safe, I'll let you do almost anything you want to do. Once you cross the line where it's really not safe for you to be home alone, are there ways to allow you to stay home a little bit longer by hiring nurses to come into your home a few hours a week or round-the-clock care, whatever you need? Round-the-clock care is very expensive. So when you start looking at the realities of aging in place, if you've got a pile of money, then absolutely you can do it. I'm a social person. I want to go to an assisted living. I could go right now because I want 3 meals a day and maid service. So I don't know what everybody's hesitation. And this place looks really pretty. So I don't know what the hesitation is, but I had a family come in and hardly any money in the bank, not a big income. And she said, no, I am staying home forever. And I'm like, how are you going to afford this? And it wasn't a reality. And when we're talking about plans, I said, okay, plan A, she's going to stay home. Okay. Plan B, medically, she can't stay home. We're going to attempt to find a nurse to come in a little bit. And plan C, she's going to go into the skilled nursing. And so I make people say, okay, if your plan A doesn't work, let's talk about B, C, and D. And she was very hesitant to talk about B, C, and D, but there's no way that lady could age in place.
Joe Steckler, I'm talking about our president and founder, he's always talked about a thing. He calls them elements of care. And that's one of the things he talks about in an aging plan. What he wants you to do is get the right level of service for the circumstance that you're in now, understanding you may need more help later. So like I've heard him do TV shows and radio shows where he talked with somebody in the home health business, and he would talk about, isn't it maybe the most cost effective, like you get somebody coming in a little bit as companion care, get used to somebody in the home. Then if things, you need more, then you can move to another level and all that. But I was thinking too, the flip side of that is we have a good friend with Hibiscus Court, Heidi Kuchenbecker, who basically runs with all of that. And she has this thing, she goes, what do most people say? I want to win the lottery. And what do I get when I win the lottery? I get a cook, I get housekeeping, I get my grass cut, I get transportation, chauffeur services, all these. She's like, what do you think we have here for you? So it really is interesting because as people wrestle with those decisions, it sounds like what you're saying is you should prioritize, right? You say, this is what I would want to do first. If circumstances won't let me do that, then I think in this direction.
Absolutely. And the other question always is, the kids always want mom or dad to move back north. Well, if you've been in Florida for a good period of time, I've been here for a very long time. There's no way I'm going to shovel snow. So going back north for a lot of people really isn't the ideal. I had a good friend that she and her husband were both starting to age, and the kids made them move back to the DC area. And they were miserable. They sold a beautiful, condo on the beach. They'd been in for 25, 30 years. All their friends were there. And they moved back north, and the kids have children that are still in school. They're playing soccer every weekend. So they really didn't have any time for mom or dad up north either. So why didn't they just let them stay here in their condo? Actually would have been fine for a while. They had the resources to stay, and then go into an assisted living near where they were living. So they would still have their community. They've been here for a long time. So the kids are really quick to say, okay, I got to keep flying down because you've got a medical crisis.
Right.
And mom has to move back north. That's not always the ideal situation.
Well, that kind of goes into, I remember something Rachel said. It's not that you guys are pretty, I guess, innovative in the fact that you have case management in your office, because that's a level. I know when we talk to the people who provide home health services that are part of the Helping Seniors Network, and they talk about what an important link that is for the family, because they may be up north or Midwest or out west. And so they don't have the time, and particularly as COVID taught us, they couldn't even get here if they wanted to check up on mom and dad. So having kind of local hands and eyes and arms on the ground was really like something that would help people feel so much better about, mom and dad being remote. And that was something that Rachel echoed when we were talking about this last month. She says, a lot of times it's not, this is a way that they can have peace of mind. And let's be honest, here again, it goes back to the proficiency, because this is what you guys do day in and day out. It's not guesswork. I remember being a frustrated adult son of aging mother, and the doctors would say, here's this, or you need to do this. And, you really don't have a frame of reference, because you don't have that, you might think you're smart, but you don't have that frame of reference to go up against. And that's why having that kind of help, I think, is so valuable.
Well, I started doing case management about 7 or 8 years ago. And I had a lovely World War II vet, and I'd done a will and a trust for him, and his only child passed away, and there was no other family. And I was doing the VA benefit documents for him, and realized a case manager actually was stealing his money. And so I went to a computer, got his bank account online, and there was all these missing checks out of his checkbook. And so I was able to pull them up. And long story short, I said, I'm just going to take care of you. I'm so upset with the whole situation. So I took care of him for many, many years. He passed away a couple of years ago, but that started off case management. And when I got up to about 5 or 6 of these lovely people, I called myself a rent-a-daughter. So here I am, a rent-a-daughter. I hired Rachel McLean to come in to be our case manager. And now we've got 30, 40. I'm afraid to ask the total number of how many we have under case management. It's a large number. And she has a new assistant as well.
But that goes back to this point. Like I said, what we've learned, I'm talking about internally, is we try to do the best we can. We live in a county, 650,000 people, give or take, and 1 in 4 is over the age of 65. And then 1 in 2, if you want to use AARP definition, because they'll send you a card when you turn 50, they say you're a senior. And you may be offended, but they're counting you as one. So that's 1 in 2.
I'm offended, just to let everybody know. Every time I get them in the mail, I throw them out. I refuse.
Well,
I don't want the discount that bad.
Well, but the fact is, we live in a county where I use it. My line is, you either are a senior, love and care for a senior, God willing, you're going to be a senior sooner or later. All this is relevant for you to think about. And so, but one of the things that we've learned along the way about this exploring how you build an aging plan is that the corollary, and this is why I really think this is going to be our theme for next year, is don't try this on your own. Because referring back to the gentleman that spoke so highly of you guys and putting together he said, I just feel really good because I have a book, I can go to it, I can show it, share it with my family, it's all real clear. But this is like a highly successful business guy, and he comes from, I've hired attorneys my whole life in business dealing. He said, so I started to research this online and figure out, maybe I could just do this myself. And he said, pretty quickly, I got to understand, just like I wouldn't hire a business attorney to handle, a very complex transaction, this makes sense to get somebody who really knows what they're doing. And so this whole idea of don't try this on your own, especially when we're blessed to live in a county that has such great experts. You know, I'm talking about, when we talk about everything, I'm talking about, you know, like you're talking about case management, we're talking about options for transportation, we're talking about places that you could choose to live in if you said, I want to live beyond my current home, or even if you say, I love my home, I want to make it safe, I want to do the right things. So many resources. And just like we've been talking about, the paperwork to enable you to do that. And it's like, you know, I keep coming back to that. You know, most of us deal with this once or twice in our life because, you know, it becomes somewhat a front burner issue for us. You know, medical things happen, but you're doing this every week. So the things that may shock or surprise us, you're kind of like, we've been here before. This is how we approach this.
All day long. And every family is different and unique. And so it's, again, there's nothing I haven't seen at this point. You know, we have children that are felons that want to be executors, which you can't be. I mean, it's just crazy, the things that we see. But and a lot of times I tell people, I don't know every answer, but I certainly have enough people that research, or we have friends in the community that we'll reach out to. I'm not the pompous attorney that says I know everything. I really don't, but I certainly know the best people in town to ask the questions for. And I will, during a consultation, grab my cell phone, call somebody, and try to fix the problem. People ask me what I do all day long. I fix problems all day long. And it just happened to be for older people, usually.
That's good. So
the older people get into more trouble than teenagers. So,
well, it's a complicated landscape out there. So we're gonna stop. We'll have a minute or two for some questions and things. But before we get there, I just want to make sure you really do a lot of seminars and you provide so much information to the community. If somebody says, I want to get a list of when you guys are offering different kind of seminars, or I want to maybe sit down and figure out I need to take another step, maybe have my paperwork reviewed, or maybe I need to get some paperwork done, how do they reach you?
Well, our phone number is 321-345-5945. And our website is amybvanfossen.com. And all of our seminars are online.
Okay.
And again, if you come to a seminar, you know, don't have to pay anything. It's just in our conference room, nothing too fancy. But if you do a seminar, you get a free consultation. So that's one way to avoid a consultation, is to come back to a seminar. And again, we do 3 or 4 different ones. And a lot of times I'll have somebody go through the estate planning seminar first. If you want to know about the foundation, is the estate planning seminar. And then they'll come back from Medicaid, and maybe there's VA benefits possible, come back to VA. And then after all of the estate planning is done, they'll come back to a trust funding seminar. So
yeah, which is interesting, because for me, I always came up with the impression that trust funds are for like rich people. You know, we're old enough here, we remember Beverly Hillbillies and swimming pools and movie stars. That's always like this. Somebody said, oh, this trust. And I was sitting with the attorney in your office, Tyler Rente. She's like, Kerry, if you have a bank account, you have a piece of real estate, we need to talk about if you should have a trust. I'm like, wow, it really, really attaches to everybody. But these are the things we don't know if we don't get the right help and ask the right questions. So thank you, Amy, for being here today.
I'm Joe Steckler. Thank you for joining our program today. I'd like to remind you that our senior information line is available to you at 321-473-7770. There you can get help and direction that could be helpful for your specific situation or circumstances. The work of helping seniors is very important, but we can't do it alone. That is why our sponsors here in Brevard County are so important. I'd like to thank our many area sponsors, businesses, and medical providers who support the mission of helping seniors that help us carry the cost of our media efforts. If you'd like to join us either as a business partner or simply donate as an individual, we welcome your call at 321-473-7770. You are always welcome to visit our website at www.helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. Thanks so much for your help. It does make a difference.